I'm going to give you my take on where this is all going. What a crazy year this has been. If you had told me 3 months before we launched Abra into beta that the price of Bitcoin would get to almost 20,000 and then fall down to 5,000 or wherever it was, and there'd be a fork, 5 forks of Bitcoin, it just wouldn't make sense. But yet here we are. So I'm going to give you my take in the next few minutes on where it's all going, and then I'm happy to make it a little interactive, and I know we're going to have a longer discussion after the next presentation as well. Okay, so using my exponential technology-based time machine, I was able to fly 4 years into the future before this talk, and I was able to see a couple of really interesting press releases that I want to give you some insights on, because maybe you want to invest in these companies now. So this is a kid I met named Samuel in Tanzania. Samuel's got a light in his home for the first time because his family has purchased a new solar system that basically uses their Kenyan and Tanzanian-based M-Pesa wallets to make monthly lease payments on a new solar panel. It's really cool. They've now sold, 4 years later, over 1 million of these installations. The repayment rate is like 100% because people want the lights. Nobody steals them because they guard them really well. The company is doing phenomenally well. The challenge up until now, 2022, has been how do we do this outside of these markets? Because in Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, everybody has that M-Pesa wallet, so they can make that $5 weekly payment on these solar panels. What we really want to do is we want to deploy them globally. But how does somebody in Indonesia pay? How does somebody in India pay, or rural China? So they finally figured out that using cryptocurrency technology, they could bring this service global, or make the service global, so that they could deploy it in over 100 countries. So effectively what they launched is the world's first pay-as-you-go solar service, live in over 100 countries. Really cool. This is Angelica. She's a farmer in rural Philippines that I met also in my time machine. And she actually takes money that she makes and puts it in these micro-investing services. She actually buys exposure to US stock indices all the way from the Philippines in tiny pennies at a time. And over time, it's ballooned to a very significant value. The challenge for them has been the same, this company that provides this service. Right? We have to go on the ground and partner with lots of banks to make this service work in just a couple of countries. But now we've figured out that using cryptocurrency technology, we can actually make this service work live, globally, in actually more than 100 countries, and they've done that now. It's really fascinating. So how is it possible? Like, I have tried to deploy mobile banking services in like 15 countries, and gave up because I had a headache perpetually for years, right? But here we are, right, 4 years later, and they've been able to figure out how to deploy these services, right? How is this possible, right? So I figured out what they're doing, and the service has to obviously, by definition, be globally accessible. But the payment mechanism, we'll come back to that in a second, obviously it has to be internet-based. But the payment mechanism not only has to be stable, preferably in a currency that the consumer understands. The average consumer doesn't know what Monero is, but if you're in Indonesia, they know rupiahs. So how do you reconcile the fact that I want to put money in the system in rupiahs, but in order to make that solar panel work in 100 countries, right, I probably can't use local banks in 100 countries to make the payment. The money flows just don't work. So let's take a step back and talk about how not to do this. Okay? So you probably can glance at this for about 5 seconds and find a common thread. These are all currencies that have effectively failed. Actually, I'll take a step back. Every currency in history at some point has failed. Either that or it's going to fail at some point. Right? These are the ones that have failed spectacularly, with the most recent one, of course, being the Bolivar, which more or less capitulated this week. Over time, I have counted, well, let's just go back 100 years, right? There's about 30 currencies that have failed due to hyperinflation and currency inflation over the last 100 or so years. I want to show you, because this is going to paint a story as to where I think we're going, what happens when you start printing money as if it didn't matter, right? So most people focus on inflation meaning the cost of goods and services. Think a little bit differently about it. Look at the green line. That's simply the amount of money in circulation. Now, my mother has a 1950-something Mickey Mantle baseball card, and I think it's worth a lot of money. I'm not sure how much it's worth. But what it's worth is dependent upon how many there are. So let's say she had the only one in existence, and it was worth $10,000. Now, if she found out tomorrow there were 2 in circulation, it would stand to reason that that card might actually now be worth about $5,000, right? But for some strange reason, after hundreds of years, governments refuse to get that basic concept. Over and over and over, they make the same mistake. So here's the US, right? Look at what's happened to our money supply in the last 3 years. Let me just bring up this picture again. Right? Now, I'm not telling you what's going to happen. I'm just asking you to accept the fact that history leaves clues, right? And here's clue number 1. All right, enough of that. What's happened to our money in the last, I don't know, 100 years, right? Basically, the purchasing power of the dollar has fallen 90% in the last 100 years. The only reason that most of us aren't up in arms about it is either 1, we weren't here 100 years ago, or 2, if we were here 100 years ago, we're now dead. That's the only reason. If we were living to be 150, there'd be riots in the streets because your money would be worthless, and you would know it, right? So the pattern here is very clear. Money was based upon a commodity standard up until the World War II. And what happened after World War II is very clear, is also equally clear. So now let's relate this back to my earlier research, which said we need some kind of stable store of value to make these global payment systems work. Is it really finally time for a new commodity standard? Now, obviously this talks about Bitcoin, so you can guess where I'm going. But I tried to find a parallel to say, is there some kind of history lesson to be learned from what happened with the internet itself? And I actually did some research, and it was amazing what I found. Okay, here's a quote, actually a friend of mine. I'm not picking on Karen. She knows payments. I would claim she doesn't really know Bitcoin, but there's a lot of people who don't know Bitcoin and make comments on Bitcoin. Bitcoin has only 2 proven use cases after 8 years, criminal activity and speculation. And there's so much naysaying hyperbole out there. I just picked one fairly randomly. But I went back and searched archives on the internet itself, or news about the internet itself, and found this. I predict the internet will soon go spectacularly supernova, and in 1996 catastrophically collapse. And this is the person who actually created Ethernet. Okay, basically said the internet can't basically survive under its own weight. Obviously, the one on the right is easy to prove because it's already transpired that he was wrong. And I believe that the quote on the left is mathematically provably wrong, which I'm going to show you now. Right? Meaning I can actually show you provable use cases as to where it is the only technology that can solve the problem today that don't involve criminal activity and speculation. Now, let's extend that internet analogy. These are the businesses that have either died, been transformed in some way because of the internet. Right? Again, easy to prove, it's already happened. These are the businesses that I believe, in the same vein, will be either replaced, transformed, killed, or dramatically changed in some way because of Bitcoin and its underlying blockchain technology. And when I say blockchain technology, I'm still talking about Bitcoin. Okay? All right, let's get this out of the way. Here's the market cap. This is an asset class that did not exist 10 years ago. Right? Forget about the volatility swings. The most important feature of Bitcoin as it relates to volatility is that 1 Bitcoin today is 1 Bitcoin tomorrow. Okay? It's not the price today. Because if everything else I'm saying is true, it's the fungibility of Bitcoin that matters, not its price in dollars. But the fact that it didn't exist 10 years ago, and we're all sitting, the fact that you're sitting here listening to me talk about this, I've been at this for 30 years. I've been in crypto at the CIA, finance at Goldman Sachs. I worked on the first credit card gateway on the internet. I can tell you, I've never believed more fundamentally in my life that something is here to stay that hasn't proven itself yet than this. Right? This is about to change everything. The same way I believed in '95 that the internet was about to change everything. But what is really the killer app for this? Well, I'm going to give you 3. Right? We're going to talk about cross-border payments, investing, and asset finance, and then relate it back to what I found when I traveled into the future. So let's talk about cross-border payments. Most of you have heard of the remittance market. About 500 billion gets remitted on the grid, meaning via the traditional banking system, whether it's Western Union or just bank wires. Equal amount of money gets remitted underground. People carrying money back home, people using ancient Hawala type of solutions where they call a friend to give out money, et cetera, et cetera. So that's $1 trillion, which generates probably $50 to $60 billion in FX and transaction fees for banks, Western Union, et cetera, et cetera. Okay? According to our calculations at Abra, if you were to replace not even the user-facing aspect of it, meaning the pay in and pay out would still be in dollars and pesos, but just the rails, right, with Bitcoin, at least 100 basis points would go back into the system, meaning to the consumer, right? And that's at least, half of those fees, according to my calculation today. That's an incredible amount of money that basically is completely wasted. Now, the biggest challenge with that is I don't think Western Union, for example, would understand a word of what I just said. But eventually they will, right? And at that point, right, everything is going to change from a money transfer perspective because it will be instant, it will be practically free. Here's an example of a service we've been testing in the Philippines that uses what we call cash tellers on the ground that effectively are buying and selling legally Bitcoin. Now, half of the consumers know they're buying Bitcoin because they're using the tellers to invest in crypto. The other half are using the tellers to actually get money on and off a phone in a foreign exchange transaction. They only know that they're holding digital pesos. They don't actually know that the transaction is happening in Bitcoin. The teller makes a small fee, which is a fraction of the Western Union SWIFT fees, and everybody's happy. And on the US side, they can put the money in via ACH, just like you do with Venmo. And so effectively, you have a simulated cross-border wire that actually doesn't even leave the Bitcoin network. All right? Decentralized investing. What does that mean? Well, let's go back to that original example of micro-investing. What if I wanted a way to invest in anything in India? I wanted to invest in Apple stocks, US ETFs, gold, but I wanted to do it in $1 chunks. It would be very difficult today, very, very difficult. But what if I could give you a way using Bitcoin-based smart contracts to hold the value in a very secure, mathematically guaranteed way on a smartphone? That would solve a few problems. One, no central company would be holding the money, because if you're using Bitcoin correctly, you're actually holding the keys. Well, how can I capture the value of Apple stock in a Bitcoin private key that's on my phone? Right? Well, what I'm telling you is not only is that possible, if you use Abra, you've been using just that to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars in transaction volume that we've conducted exactly that way. So if you hold anything but Bitcoin in the Abra app, Bitcoin is just stored in a Bitcoin private key, anything, dollars, euros, pesos, Ripple, Monero, Dash, any other currency, what you're actually holding is a multisig Bitcoin smart contract that pegs the value of Bitcoin to that asset, right? How many of you understood that? Good, I didn't want you to understand that. So no, what I'm really saying is that I just basically did the digital equivalent of handing you a bunch of gold so that you're holding the gold, and then gave you a derivative contract that tied the gold to anything, whatever asset you chose, right? All on the Bitcoin blockchain. So this is effectively what's going on to accomplish that. It doesn't matter what the asset is. I could do this with baseball cards so long as there is a liquid market for baseball cards. Why does this matter? Well, this now makes it legal in 150 countries to invest in something because there's no third party managing custody. There's no third party broker. We're simply acting as the counterparty to the contract, right? And no assets have to change hands because it's all happening on the Bitcoin blockchain. It's a huge breakthrough, okay? Now, I showed you how money transfer can be made global, cheap, near free via Bitcoin, how investing, and by the way, you can do this even with mashup of assets. So if you take Apple stock and Google stock and you mash them up, you can actually create a new coin, right, doing this. Abra's actually built this stuff. Sounds a lot like an ETF, right? Okay, well, stay tuned. So now I've showed you how you can enable global investing in a way that's not possible without this technology, and how you can do money transfer in a way that's not possible without this technology. Well, let's bring, and this screen is the basis for both of those solutions. Let's bring those together in another real-world example that completely hides all of this to the consumer, but solves a big problem. Let's go back to that solar panel example. Remember I mentioned 1 million plus homes, East Africa, et cetera, all, again, using the local banking system via M-Pesa. Works great. I've tried it. It's really a breakthrough for those countries, and the penetration is astounding. Right? But what about the company M-Copa that wants to do this everywhere, that can't because there's no single easy way to pay? Credit card networks are out of the question because in rural areas the fees are going to be 10% plus FX when they have to settle. Right? And half these consumers won't have bank accounts to begin with. They're probably going to want to pay with cash. Well, using that teller model I described where I can easily get crypto on a smartphone, right? Abra can not only solve that problem for solar panels, I can solve it for any consumer electronic device. Washing machine, refrigerator, anything that you can basically put a SIM chip in to create internet connectivity, I can now remotely control to say if you've made that lease payment using a simple crypto wallet, you can then use the device. So we've actually started building this out. We call it instant-on leasing. In Europe, they refer to it sometimes as PayGo for local services like M-Copa. And our intent is to build a stack that we open up to the world where anyone can basically turn a device into a hardware-as-a-service business that will work globally. Foxconn made an investment in Abra last year explicitly for this reason. Okay. So now, I've just shown you 3 applications of Bitcoin that actually work with Bitcoin today. Bitcoin does not need to be upgraded, changed in any way whatsoever for all 3 of these to work. Now, next generation tech like Lightning that help it scale are going to be great. They're going to help this work even better, but this works even without that. Okay? So let's go back to our 2 press releases, right? Global availability of micro investing, pay-as-you-go solar service in 100 countries. It's now clear to me that Bitcoin solves these problems, even if the consumer doesn't know they're using it, which is probably the key, which I also think is highly likely to be the case, just like your mother doesn't know what TCP/IP is when she watches Netflix, but she still watches Netflix. Right? That's how fundamental Bitcoin is to the future of commerce. But because it addresses all 3 of these issues, globally accessible, stable store of value, and it's internet-based. Okay? So I'm happy to answer a couple of questions. I think we have a couple of minutes, so I don't know if there's a mic floating around, but if there's one in the back, if we don't get to you fast enough, we just shout it out, I'll repeat. But anybody want to ask a question? Shout it out, go ahead.
So what about regulations or regulations?
Hi. So what about regulators around the world? They're trying to figure out a way to I don't know if to stop or to regulate money transfers or remittances across the world because they're actually de facto disrupt the business of current banks. Yeah. So they haven't figured out a way, and these rails bypass a KYC or AML process around.
Sure. You can't bypass AML, anti-money laundering, or know your customer regulation when you touch the banking system. You simply can't. But what you can do is you can store software on a phone. The government can't stop you from storing ones and zeros on a smartphone, which, for example, is what happens when you use Abra. There's actually a private key on your phone. There's no central custodian. So they recognize that even the Chinese government doesn't stop people from storing private keys on a smartphone to own cryptocurrency. Right? They don't allow public exchanges to access the banking system, but they don't stop people from owning crypto. Most people are simply buying it on the street in exchange for cash using local Bitcoin and other services. So the people that are causing that green line up and to the right definitely are not excited, a lot of them, about this. But the good news is they can't stop it at large scale. They can make blips along the way, but long term, I have fought every crypto battle under the sun. I fought export rules at Netscape in the mid-90s on weapons-grade cryptography. We lost, and the governments will lose this battle as well and have no choice but to embrace it, and hyperinflation will finally be a thing of the past, in my opinion. It may take 25 years, but that's okay.
Hi, my name is David. Why do you say that it is a stable store of value despite the volatility that we notice in the graph?
For 2 reasons. Why is it a stable store of value? For 2 reasons. One, because it's fungible, meaning the most important quality of Bitcoin is that one Bitcoin is always equal to one Bitcoin, just like $1 is always equal to $1. That's just common sense. The second is, via those smart contracts, I can actually, in a stable manner, store an equivalent value of any asset in a Bitcoin smart contract. That's how our app works today. Whether it's dollars or Apple stock or other cryptocurrencies, makes no difference, right? Most people don't realize that Bitcoin at its core, it's programmable money, right? It's not just digital gold. Abra is simply using the crypto Bitcoin as programmable money the way it was intended to be used. I believe we're the first company to figure out how to do that, but that's what it is at its core.
Two questions. First is, Bitcoin is not very fast, but yesterday somebody mentioned a network like Lightning, which should enhance this. Second question is there any other currency like Bitcoin?
Yeah, so I commented on Lightning a couple of minutes ago, but just to reiterate what that is. So Bitcoin today, it's not necessarily slow compared to fiat. What it is limited in throughput, which has the net effect of you can only process so many transactions in a given time frame. There's what we call a second layer technology called Lightning, a Lightning network that basically has figured out how to, on top of the Bitcoin network, process a near endless number of transactions and then settle those transactions onto the Bitcoin network, but do it in a way that preserves the privacy and the best benefits of Bitcoin along the way. The Lightning Network is now being deployed. There's thousands of these Lightning nodes live all over the world. What's interesting about it, it actually could represent an opportunity for banks to provide services in crypto. And we'll see what happens. What was your second question again?
Similar currencies like Bitcoin.
Sorry? Similar currencies to Bitcoin. Yeah, so there are many cryptocurrencies. Some are actually forks of Bitcoin. Litecoin is a fork of Bitcoin who, their properties are they allow more transaction throughput. There's other brand new, Ethereum, EOS is a new currency. There's literally hundreds of cryptocurrencies out there. All have different kind of technology benefits and advances and things that they're trying to do to compete with Bitcoin. We love the technology of having lots of different cryptos because it propels the whole space forward, right? And you can go to either abra.com or other places and read about the differences. Some are trying to solve different problems: privacy, transaction volume throughput, IoT, connectivity, whatever. There's a million reasons to create a new currency these days, right?
Yeah. Hello?
I'll repeat. Just go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
My question is, everything else is beautiful. There's just one thing about the massive percentage of Bitcoin that is in the hands of whales and how they can affect this. That's one of the things.
Yep.
And there's also big scale mining farms, let's say, in China. And how do you see this in terms of the governance?
Yeah, good question. So the 2 points made to address were how do we reconcile the large holders of Bitcoin who may not be using the Bitcoin or just holding it as whales, and how do we address this issue of Chinese-based mining centralization? So both are related, actually. So I don't know if any of you here, if you're attending Singularity, I'm sure this would be interesting to you. Read some of the basic, go to Rothbardian's websites or whatever, and just read some very basic tenets of Austrian economics. And they wrote about what happens when you have a deflationary asset long before the idea of Bitcoin existed, right? But what's astounding is Bitcoin is playing out the Austrian playbook to the letter. They actually predicted exactly what's happening, meaning massive hoarding, right? Meaning the short-term volatility driven by the volume of buyers, since the whales aren't selling, which is exactly what we're seeing right now. Right? But eventually, the prediction goes, the asset becomes so valuable, right, that people have no choice but to loosen up the purse strings to take advantage of their newfound wealth. And I think we're 3 or 4 years away, at least, from that happening. But in the meantime, applications like what I showed you are viable using the tech, even if the whales aren't selling en masse, because someone's trading and selling. That's all we need. The second issue has to do with mining centralization. This is a more complex issue, but basically a couple of companies have figured out how to game the system by having ASIC chips that are highly optimized for the proof of work algorithms that basically are the game you play in order to win Bitcoin every 10 minutes. I think a few things are going to happen over the next few years. One, the crypto algorithms, like the elliptic curve algorithms, they're going to have to change. We're going to have to get away from SHA-256 because, one, it's going to become breakable, whether it's via, pie in the sky stuff or just smart NSA employees, I don't know. Eventually, it's going to become easily breakable, which all encryption eventually does, and you move on to the next thing. So that will hopefully address some of that. The second part is that as the amount of computing power is growing exponentially, yes, the chips are becoming centralized, but the actual ownership of the hash power is not. Right? So if you actually look at the mining pools and break it down into actually who owns the hash power, it is not nearly centralized in any meaningful way. I don't like the fact that I don't care where they're from, whether it's China or Israel, US, makes no difference to me. But I don't like the fact that it's one company that's got a monopoly on that. I don't trust one company to do anything. Even Abra, by the way. I would like lots of Abras out there eventually. I just want to be the biggest one. Right? But I do think that this problem will be a non-problem over time for the reasons that I mentioned. And I think the crypto algorithm one is actually a much bigger concern than the mining chips because Bitcoin doesn't have centralized governance by definition. And that's been a challenge for Bitcoin in terms of actually moving the tech forward. So when it comes time to change SHA-256, where we really have no choice, I hope it happens quickly enough to not become a problem. I think we have time for one more question, then we'll go back to the next.
As an individual and also as an investor, it's very difficult to funds and also to use the banking platform that already exists.
Yep.
When do you think this is going to be more flexible?
Yep.
When the fiat is coming? And also, what do you think about the custodial services? Because part of the equation and part of the...
All right, so you stop it because you asked 3 questions in one, even though they're telling me to get off the stage. So, okay, so there's 150 live cryptocurrency exchanges now in different countries. And so all of them access the banking system in some way. It's not often easy, the amount of paperwork they put you through. Some of them, it's ridiculous, make you make a video of yourself speaking. It's crazy. But also to their defense, the amount of fraud in the Bitcoin world, unfortunately, as it relates to the banking system, not Bitcoin itself, is very high. Okay? But I am aware of at least 150 countries now where you can buy Bitcoin via the banking system, and more are coming online all the time. I think the key to that question is simply time. Right? Second question was about an ETF. There are 12 applications pending, to my knowledge, for Bitcoin-based ETFs. None have been approved yet. I believe my opinion and the opinion of a bunch of insiders is one will be approved in the next 6 to 12 months. And I think the reason that one will be approved is pretty much the same reason why one hasn't been approved, is that it's people like my friends that are applying in the first batch, and that's not who they want to approve. They want to approve the old, gray-haired suit guys who are already running ETFs so that they have comfort that they know these people. Right or wrong, I think that's what they're waiting for, and I think that's going to happen because those are some of the applications that are pending. So you will see a US-based ETF, in my opinion, in the next 12 months for that reason. I think that's nonsense, but that's what's going to happen. And I don't remember your last question. Custody. Okay, so I could talk for an hour on custody, but I think custody is the key reason why institutional money is not coming into crypto en masse yet, and why it's about to. I used to work at Goldman. I can tell you for a fact they've got a whole bunch of people working on building custody services inside the firewall because they are not going to outsource custody to Coinbase or any other company. It's not going to happen. Some of the smaller companies might. Some of the more traditional players might get into it, but that's the key, right? If the buy side at Goldman wants to sell crypto right now, they can't. Where are they going to put it? They have no place to put it legally. So as soon as they address that, which I believe they're doing right now, you will see large amounts of institutional money coming into the crypto space in that 24-month time frame. And I think it's one key, pardon the pun, but there are others, but it's a big one. And I think I have to stop because I'm being waved off. So I guess we'll see you in a few minutes. Thanks a lot.